My name is Talia Grayson, and I'm 33 years old. 4 months ago, I thought I knew exactly what my life would look like by this time next year. I'd be standing in a white dress under a string of overpriced fairy lights, saying vows I'd rewritten 6 times to make them sound both casual and profound. My parents would be crying. His parents would be pretending not to. Our friends would be drunk on champagne and sentiment. Instead, I'm sitting here in an apartment that suddenly feels too quiet, replaying one sentence over and over in my head until it sounds like it belongs to someone else's life. Stop introducing me as your future wife. It makes me look like I settled. Daniel didn't whisper it. He didn't say it in a half-joking tone you could misinterpret if you were feeling fragile. He said it in the car, on the highway, with the kind of tight-knit, controlled irritation that tells you, this isn't a thought that just showed up tonight. It's been living in his head for a while. If you'd asked me a year ago to describe us, I would have said we were solid. Not some epic, cinematic love story. Just good, steady, real. We met when I was 30 and he was 31 at a financial compliance seminar, which is really just a glamorous way of saying mandatory work thing with bad coffee. I work in risk management at a mid-sized firm. Daniel's a corporate lawyer. He made a joke about how the pastries tasted like legal liability, and I laughed harder than the joke deserved. We were the last 2 people in the room that day. Him finishing an email on his laptop, me trying to look busy, so I didn't have to make small talk with my manager in the hallway. He asked if I wanted to grab a drink to debrief the trauma. I said yes. We were one of those couples that made sense on paper. 2 professionals, decent incomes, similar backgrounds, similar ideas about wanting marriage and kids. Eventually, not now. We moved in together after a year, got engaged last spring, set a wedding date for next October. For a long time, I thought we were on the same page. Then, a few months ago, the page started to feel like it had very fine print I hadn't noticed. It started small, little comments about my job, my trajectory, the people I spent time with. You've been in that role a while, haven't you? He'd say, scrolling through his phone. Don't you want to aim higher? Or, my friend Mark just made partner at 35. His wife's already VP at her firm. Power couple, you know? He'd say it like an observation, like weather, not a criticism, not directly. But when someone you love keeps bringing up the forecast, eventually you start wondering if they're telling you to carry an umbrella. I make good money. Not look at my bonus on Instagram money, but solid. I like my work-life balance. I like finishing my day and not needing to check my email at midnight. For me, that felt like success. For Daniel, apparently, it started to feel like dead air. 3 weeks ago, we went to his friend Vanessa's engagement party. Big event, rooftop, rented lighting, a flower wall people lined up to take pictures in front of. The kind of party where everyone's casually discussing vacation homes and equity packages. We walked in, and he squeezed my hand a little too tightly, the way he does when he's in networking mode. We made the rounds. When we reached a group of people he clearly wanted to impress, I smiled and did what I always do. Hi, I'm Talia, and this is my fiancé, Daniel. Polite, simple, true. Later, on the drive home, the air in the car felt heavier than it should have for a night that had gone fine. Can you not do that? He said suddenly. I watched the blur of streetlights in the window. Do what? Introduce me like that. Like what? As your fiancé? He tightened his grip on the steering wheel. It just sounds weird. Like you're making some big announcement. I don't know. It makes me uncomfortable. We're engaged, I said quietly. Is it weird to say what's true? He sighed. I'm just saying you don't have to lead with it every time, okay? It feels like you're trying to claim something in front of people. Claim something. At the time, I told myself he was tired. The party had been long. He'd had 2 whiskeys on an empty stomach. I let it go. I wish that had been the only time. 2 nights ago, we had dinner with some of his colleagues and old law school friends. A long table, dim lighting, the kind of place where the waiters top up your wine before you're even finished. Someone asked how we met. The story came out easily. I'd told it enough times it felt like a script. When they asked how long we'd been together, I smiled. 3 years, I said, and this is my future husband. We're getting married next October. The table went briefly quiet, just a second. People smiled. Someone said, congratulations. Conversation moved on. But across from me, Daniel's face had gone tight, like a muscle pulled too far. He didn't say anything during dinner. He laughed at the right places, told a story about a case he was working on, refilled my water glass, like always. The second we got in the car, he shut the door harder than necessary. I asked you not to do that, he said. Do what? My voice came out careful, though I already knew. Introduce me like that, as your future husband. I blinked. That's literally what you are. It makes me look like I settled. The words hit me in the chest, cold and blunt. I'm sorry, I said slowly. Like you what? Like I couldn't do better, he snapped. Like I just picked someone convenient. When you say it like that in front of my colleagues, it highlights the fact that you're not... He stopped, jaw clenching. Not what? My voice sounded thin, even to me. He looked out at the road. Not on the same level as my friends' partners. They're marrying doctors, executives, entrepreneurs. You're comfortable. You've been in the same role for years. You're good at what you do, but you're not ambitious like them. There it was, the fine print in bold. So introducing you as my future husband, I said quietly, makes you look like you settled. You're twisting my words. I'm repeating them back to you. He exhaled hard. You're taking it out of context. All I'm saying is you don't need to be so public about it. My colleagues talk. They compare. When you say it like that, it draws attention to the fact that you're not decorative enough, I asked. Successful enough? Impressive enough to be on your arm without lowering your stock price? Talia, he warned. Something in me went very still. For 3 years, I'd been measuring myself by this man's approval without fully realizing it, adjusting, softening, laughing off little digs because I told myself he didn't mean them. Now I was staring at the unvarnished version. You think being engaged to me makes you look like you settled, I said. You think I make you look bad? He didn't say yes. He didn't have to. He just went quiet in the driver's seat, swallowed hard, and kept his eyes on the road. We drove home like strangers. He went to bed after muttering that he was exhausted and didn't want to fight. I sat on the couch in the dark, my phone face down on the coffee table, the silence ticking louder than any clock. I didn't cry. That surprised me. Instead, I felt something inside me click into place. Not anger exactly, not yet. Clarity. If I stayed, this would be my life. Constantly auditioning for the role of impressive enough, knowing the director was someone who'd already decided I was miscast. After about 2 hours, I picked up my laptop. First, I pulled up the shared calendar, where Daniel had dumped every event we were supposedly attending over the next few months. Wedding showers, firm galas, birthday dinners, brunches with his inner circle. Every place he wanted to parade me when it suited him. At each one, my name appeared as his +1. His accessory? I opened my email and one by one sent polite messages to the hosts I knew. Hi, unfortunately I won't be able to attend. So sorry for the late notice. I hope the event goes wonderfully. I didn't mention Daniel, I didn't explain. I just quietly removed myself from his narrative. Then I did something else. I opened a new message and scrolled to a contact I rarely initiated conversation with, Melissa Hart. Daniel's best friend since college. The one person in his circle who'd ever asked me how I was doing and actually waited for the answer. Hey Melissa, it's Talia. Do you have a minute to talk about Sunday's brunch? She responded almost immediately. Sure. Everything okay? Not even close. We ended up on a call at nearly midnight, my voice low as I told her exactly what Daniel had said. I expected her to defend him, to say I was overreacting. She didn't. Oh my God, she said instead. He actually used the word settled? His exact phrase was, stop introducing me as your future wife. It makes me look like I settled. There was a long, furious silence on her end. What do you need me to do? She asked. By the time we hung up, the plan was simple. Sunday's brunch was at Daniel's favorite restaurant. Bottomless mimosas, reclaimed wood tables, the works. Melissa would get there early. She'd ask the staff to place an envelope at Daniel's seat before anyone else arrived. Inside that envelope, he'd find a letter I would write and a printed confirmation from the venue we'd booked for our wedding. Cancellation confirmed. By the time I finally went to bed, Daniel was snoring softly beside me, blissfully unaware that his life had just quietly shifted on its axis. He thought tomorrow would be more of the same. I stared at the ceiling in the dark and thought, no, tomorrow you find out I'm not something you settle for. On Sunday morning, the apartment felt unnaturally quiet, like even the walls were waiting to see what would happen. Daniel moved around the bedroom with the stiff, brittle energy of someone pretending everything was fine. He ironed his shirt twice, changed his watch, checked the mirror too many times. Maybe he sensed something was off. Maybe guilt whispers even when you ignore it. I stayed in the kitchen, sipping coffee I barely tasted. He kept glancing at me, waiting for me to say I'd changed my mind about coming to the brunch. Are you sure you're not going? He finally asked. Yes. He exhaled sharply, like my calmness irritated him more than anger would have. Can we please not make this a spectacle? He muttered. My friends are going to think something's wrong. I took another sip. Something is wrong. He froze for a second, but he didn't push. He grabbed his keys from the counter. I'll see you later. Maybe, I said. He blinked. What does that mean? But I just looked at him, steady and unreadable. After a moment, he shook his head and walked out. When the door clicked shut behind him, the quiet wrapped around me like the inside of a cocoon. I sat at the table with my coffee and let myself breathe. Deep, slow, grounding. Today wasn't revenge. It wasn't cruelty. It was clarity, delivered in the one place Daniel cared most about, his social circle. A notification buzzed on my phone, a message from Melissa. He's here. They just seated him. The envelope is in place. I stared at the screen, heartbeat steady. Okay, thank you. A minute passed, then another. And then my phone lit up like a siren. Daniel calling. I watched it ring, let it ring out. It buzzed again, and again. Then the text started. What is this? Talia, answer your phone. Tell me this is a mistake. Did you seriously cancel the venue? Pick up. Now. I turned my phone face down. 20 minutes later, the front door swung open so hard it hit the wall. Daniel stormed inside, an envelope crushed in his fist, his face a mess of humiliation, shock, and fury. What the hell is this? He demanded, holding up the papers like evidence in a trial. I stayed seated at the table. It's exactly what it looks like. You canceled the wedding venue without talking to me? I looked at him calmly. You said introducing you as my future husband makes you look like you settled. I decided to solve that problem. His mouth fell open. Are you out of your mind? You blindsided me in front of everyone. I walked in and they were all, God, Talia, Melissa was staring at me like she pitied me. Do you have any idea how humiliating that was? I raised an eyebrow. Humiliation? That's what you're worried about? You ambushed me! You told me being engaged to me makes you look like you settled. My voice stayed low, steady. What exactly should I have done? Pretended that was normal? Kept smiling while you chipped away at me piece by piece? He ran a hand through his hair, pacing. You took one comment, one careless comment, and blew up our entire life. Daniel, it wasn't one comment. Don't rewrite history. I stood slowly. You've been making little digs for months. About my job, my ambition, my value to you. That's not fair. What's not fair is being with someone who sees me as a downgrade. He flinched. It wasn't like that, he insisted. I was stressed, okay? Work's been crazy, and I said things badly. No, I cut in gently but firmly. You said things honestly. That's what bothers you, not the words, the fact that I finally believed them. He stared at me, chest rising and falling, anger dissolving into panic. Talia, we're engaged. You can't just end things over a misunderstanding. It wasn't a misunderstanding, I repeated. It was clarity. I walked to the counter, opened the drawer, and took out the small velvet ring box I'd placed there last night. I set it on the table between us. He stared at it like it was a live grenade. I'm done, I said softly. I'm not going to marry someone who's embarrassed to be with me. He scrubbed a hand over his face. Please, don't do this. Not like this. You did this, I replied. The moment you decided I made you look like you settled. Silence stretched between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he sank into a chair, looking smaller than I'd ever seen him. I didn't mean it. You meant it enough to say it twice, I said. Once at the engagement party, once at dinner. That wasn't an accident. That was belief. He didn't argue. After a long moment, I spoke again, calm and final. I need you to pack a bag and stay somewhere else for a few days. We'll figure out logistics when emotions aren't clawing at everything. He looked up, eyes red. Are you really ending this? I already did. He swallowed, hard. The fight left him all at once. He stood slowly, like gravity was fighting him. I'll go to my sister's, he muttered, voice breaking. Okay. He walked to the bedroom. I listened to drawers open, close, the scrape of a suitcase zipper. When he came back out, suitcase in hand, he paused at the door. Talia, please don't do this, he said one last time, voice shaking. But I didn't answer, because if I did, if I cracked even a fraction, he'd use that softness to pull me back into the cycle. I stayed still, and after a long, painful moment, he stepped outside. The door closed behind him, and the silence that followed, it didn't feel empty. It felt like the first real breath I'd taken in months. When the silence settled, I realized how loud my own heartbeat was. I didn't move for a long time. The suitcase wheels had barely finished echoing down the hallway when my phone buzzed again. Daniel, Talia, please, can we just talk? I didn't mean it like that. Another. I'm freaking out. Please answer. I stared at the screen until the messages blurred. Then I set my phone down, screen face down, and walked to the window. The city outside looked unchanged. Cars moved. People crossed streets. Somewhere a dog barked. It felt vaguely offensive that the world wasn't pausing for what had just detonated in my life. An hour later, he called. I let it go to voicemail. By evening, the tone of his text shifted. "You're overreacting. You blindsided me at brunch. Do you have any idea how that made me look?" There it was again. How he looked. Not how I felt. I powered my phone off and went to bed alone for the first time in 3 years. Morning brought that strange, nauseous clarity that follows a big decision. For a few seconds after I woke up, I forgot. Then I rolled over and saw the empty side of the bed, the dent in the pillow, and memory rushed back like cold water. I made coffee, opened my laptop, pulled up a blank document. There's a difference between ending a relationship and disentangling a life. The first can happen in a sentence. The second requires paperwork. By 10 a.m., I was on the phone with a lawyer recommended by a coworker. We'd combine some accounts, co-sign the lease, put down deposits for the venue and a caterer. Nothing as complicated as a divorce, but messy enough. "I know it feels overwhelming," the lawyer said gently after I stumbled through a summary. "But it's good you're doing this before any legal marriage documents, property, or kids are involved." That sentence landed like a delayed explosion. Before marriage. Before kids. Before we locked in a version of my life where I was always walking 3 steps behind a man who was ashamed of being seen with me. We went through practicalities. My name on what? His name on what? What could be separated now? What would take time? After the call, I sat there in the quiet apartment, legal pads spread out in front of me, and felt something unexpected. Relief. Not joy. Not yet. Just the sense that I'd stepped off a train that had been going somewhere I didn't want to end up. Around lunchtime, my phone lit up again. This time with an unfamiliar number. I almost let it go to voicemail, then answered on impulse. "Hello? Talia, dear, it's Helen, Daniel's mom." My stomach nodded. "Hi, Helen." She exhaled shakily. Daniel called us last night, in pieces. He said you ended the engagement, that you canceled the venue." I stared at the table. A corner of the cancellation printout peeked out from under my legal pad. "I did," I said. "Can you tell me why?" Her voice softened. "He just kept saying you overreacted to something he said, that you embarrassed him in front of his friends." "Of course he did." I swallowed. "Did he tell you what he said?" A pause. "He said you were upset because he made an insensitive comment, that it came out wrong." I let out a humorless little laugh. "That's a very generous summary." "Talia, what did he say?" she asked quietly. I closed my eyes, hearing it again, word for word, like it had been carved into the back of my eyelids. "He told me," I said slowly, "to stop introducing him as my future husband because it makes him look like he's settled." Silence. He said it after I introduced him that way to his colleagues. And it wasn't the first time he'd complained. He's been making comments for months about my job, my ambition, how I compare to his friends' partners. Another silence, heavier this time. "Oh," she said finally. "Oh, Talia." Her voice went thick. "He actually used the word settled?" "Yes, those were his exact words." "Oh, sweetheart." There was a low, angry sound under her breath, not directed at me. That's not okay. That's not how you talk about someone you're supposed to marry." I felt my throat tighten unexpectedly. Of all the responses I'd imagined from his mother, this hadn't been one of them. "He's been making me feel like I'm not enough for months," I admitted. "Like I'm some downgrade he's stuck with. I'm not going to walk down an aisle towards someone who feels that way about me." "I don't blame you," she said quietly. "I'm so sorry, Talia. I don't know what's gotten into him. It's like he's lost perspective." I sat there, blinking back tears I thought I'd already used up months ago in private. "Do you think," she asked cautiously, "that there's any chance you two could work through this? Maybe counseling?" "No," I said, surprising myself with how sure I sounded. "He didn't make one mistake. He showed me who he is when it comes to me. I believe him." She exhaled. "I understand. I may not like it, but I understand. For whatever it's worth, we love you. We always have. You've been good to him. Better than he deserved, apparently." That was when the first tear actually escaped, hot and sharp, sliding down my cheek. "Thank you," I whispered. We talked a little longer. She promised to speak to him, not to fix it. She knew she couldn't, but to make him see what he'd done. I didn't ask for details. That was their relationship to untangle. When we hung up, the apartment was quiet again. But the quiet felt different. Less like abandonment, more like a clean slate. The next few weeks blurred into a rhythm of logistics and emotional whiplash. Daniel oscillated through an entire spectrum of reactions in my messages. First came anger. "You had no right to cancel the venue without me." Do you know how much money we lost? You made me look pathetic in front of everyone. Then defensiveness. I told you it came out wrong. You're twisting what I meant. No one else would throw away 3 years over a single misphrased sentence. Then slowly, desperation. Talia, I'm sorry. Please. I'm seeing someone, a therapist. I know I've been obsessed with status and appearances. I'm trying to fix it. Please talk to me. Give me a chance to prove I don't actually think you're beneath me. That one made me put my phone down and walk around the block. I responded to very few of his messages, and when I did, I kept it simple. I heard you the first time. I believe you meant what you said. We are done. Please respect that. He never really did. The brunch incident rippled through his friends like a dropped stone. Melissa kept me updated in short, blunt texts. Melissa, for the record, I told him exactly what he said to you, and I told him you didn't embarrass him. He embarrassed himself when he decided his fiancé wasn't good enough for his image. She told me that some of his friends thought I'd gone nuclear, that canceling the venue and delivering the letter at brunch was too much. Others quietly admitted they'd heard him make little comments before, jokes about how I wasn't as driven as the other wives to be, how I was content in a way that made him nervous. Funny how people always remember things in hindsight. About 3 weeks after he moved out temporarily, Daniel came to the apartment to talk about practical separation. We sat at the dining table like coworkers going over a project plan. He looked tired, thinner. There were faint shadows under his eyes. I found a new place, he said. I move in next month. Okay, I replied. We went over the lease, utilities, the remaining balances on wedding-related expenses, how much we'd already paid, what we'd lose. I'll cover the non-refundable stuff, he said abruptly, signing his name on one of the forms. You shouldn't have to pay for that. I studied him. It was my decision to cancel, Daniel. I'm willing to split the loss. He shook his head. No, His jaw tightened. You're right about one thing. I cared more about how you made me look than how you felt. The least I can do is eat the financial hit. For a second, I saw the man I'd fallen in love with, the one who'd stayed up all night with me when my dad was in the hospital, who'd made me grilled cheese at 2 a.m. when I came home crying after a brutal week at work. If he'd shown this version of himself months ago, instead of the one performing for his imaginary audience, maybe we'd be sitting here planning a wedding instead of an exit. But he hadn't, and I couldn't unknow that. A few days after that meeting, an envelope arrived in the mail addressed in his handwriting. No return address, just my name. I knew before I opened it that it wasn't more paperwork. Inside was a handwritten letter, several pages long. He'd always typed everything before. Seeing his messy, uneven script made it feel strange and intimate, like looking at his thoughts without polish. He wrote about how he'd grown up in a house where image was currency, parents obsessed with what the neighbors thought, a father who measured success in job titles and house size, a mother who treated appearances like armor. He wrote about how he'd internalized the idea that his worth depended on being impressive, and that part of that impressive package was having a partner who fit a certain picture. You were never actually not enough, he'd written. I made you feel that way because I was terrified that if my life didn't look perfect from the outside, people would see how small and insecure I really feel on the inside. I thought if my fiancé was more impressive, it would cover up my own fear that I'm not. He admitted that he'd compared me to his friends' partners not because I fell short, but because he'd decided they represented success, and he was trying to measure his life against some invisible checklist. I projected all of that onto you, the letter said near the end. I made you carry the weight of my insecurity. I'm sorry. I know sorry doesn't fix it. I know it doesn't make you unhear what I said in that car, but I need you to know I see it now. The letter ended with a strange mix of hope and acceptance. If there's any part of you that believes we could rebuild something healthier, I'd do whatever it takes. If there isn't, I'll respect that. You deserve someone who saw your worth from the beginning, not someone who had to lose you to understand it. I read it twice. Then I folded it back along its original creases, slid it into the envelope, and put it in the back of a drawer. Not because it meant nothing, but because it didn't change the most important thing. He hadn't suddenly become someone else. He'd just finally noticed who he'd been all along. And I had finally decided that I deserved better. It's strange how quickly a life can shrink down to boxes, signatures, and final balances. 1 month after Daniel moved into his new apartment, the last of our joint accounts were closed. The last piece of mail with both our names on it arrived and was forwarded. The last wedding deposit, what remained of it, was refunded. That was the day I realized there was no hour left anywhere, just two separate people whose lives had briefly tangled, then cleanly split apart. For the first time in weeks, I woke up without the knot in my stomach I'd gotten used to ignoring. I made coffee, watered the plants, opened the windows. The air felt lighter. I wasn't happy yet, but I wasn't hurting anymore. It was a start. Over the next month, my life shifted in ways I didn't expect. I reconnected with friends I'd drifted from. People who loved me without needing me to be impressive or upwardly mobile or anything besides exactly who I was. I said yes to spontaneous dinners and slow Saturday mornings and long conversations on balconies. I went back to weekend hikes, signed up for a pottery class, started reading again. Real books, not the relationship self-help articles I'd been subconsciously trying to use to fix us. I started rock climbing with a coworker, mostly because she said, "It's surprisingly good for anxious people," and I wanted to know if that was true. It was. Every day, inch by inch, I grew back into myself. The version of me that existed before Daniel's subtle comparisons and careful judgments. Before I'd shrunk myself to fit inside the outline of the person he wanted to be seen with. Before I believed good enough was something other people got to decide for me. 3 weeks into my new normal, I ran into him. Of course it happened at the one coffee shop near the old apartment, the one I'd avoided for months without admitting why. I pushed open the door, mid-text, and nearly walked straight into him. He was at a table by the window, half-empty latte in front of him, sleeves rolled up. He wasn't alone. A woman sat across from him, pretty, polished, laughing at something he'd said. When he looked up and saw me, everything in him froze. His face went pale in that instant, the way it had at brunch when he opened the envelope. "Talia," he breathed. I felt that strange, surreal calm wash over me, the same one I'd felt the day I ended it. "Hi, Daniel." The woman turned, surprised. He stammered out something. "Oh, this is a friend." But I didn't linger. I gave them both a polite nod, ordered my drink, and walked out before he could stand or follow. I didn't owe him a conversation, or an explanation, or a scene. I owed myself peace. My phone buzzed 20 minutes later. "Daniel, it was good to see you. You looked happy." This time, the message didn't sting. It just felt unnecessary. I deleted it without responding. A few days later, Melissa and I grabbed lunch, a habit we'd fallen into now that things weren't strained or complicated. She sat down with her iced tea and slid into the booth with a sigh. "Okay, so," she said, leaning in, "do you want the quick update or the long one?" I smiled. "That depends. Is it about Daniel?" Her eyes softened, apologetic. "Yeah." I stirred my soup. "Go ahead." She exhaled. "He's struggling. More than he lets on. Some of the friend group took your side pretty hard. A few just quietly backed away from him altogether." I nodded. That didn't surprise me. "And his family?" She grimaced. "Let's just say his mom didn't hold back. She told him straight up he'd ruined something good because he cared more about looking impressive than being decent." I didn't know what to feel about that. Sadness, maybe, or a distant kind of compassion. Melissa watched me carefully. "He asked about you?" "About me?" "Yeah. Wanted to know if you were seeing anyone." I shut it down, she said firmly. I told him, "That's not your business anymore. You had someone good and you made her feel like she wasn't enough. Let her move on." A warm, grateful ache bloomed in my chest. "Thank you," I murmured. "Don't thank me. Thank yourself for finally choosing you." It wasn't until I walked home that I realized something important. I wasn't angry anymore. Not at Daniel. Not at myself. Not at the time I'd spent being small for someone who didn't deserve it. The anger had burned away, leaving something quieter and sturdier behind. Not forgiveness exactly, but closure. Real closure. Not the kind you beg for. Not the kind you perform for witnesses. The kind you build yourself, piece by piece, until you can breathe without flinching. Standing at the crosswalk, sun in my eyes, I understood something with sudden, crystalline clarity. Daniel hadn't just made one bad comment. He'd revealed the truth he'd been carrying the entire time. About me. About himself. About the relationship I kept trying to talk myself into feeling happy inside. The settled comment wasn't a slip. It was the tip of the iceberg I'd been trying not to see. And walking away wasn't punishment. It was the first genuinely loving thing I'd done for myself in years. That night, I lit a candle, cleaned the apartment, and curled up on the couch with a book and a soft blanket. For the first time in a long time, the silence didn't feel heavy. It felt like home. I wasn't anyone's consolation prize. I wasn't a checkbox on someone's ambition list. I wasn't a downgrade in anyone's narrative. I was enough. And finally, I believed it.